I still remember the first time I heard that line. In the middle of the suffocating tension of a desperate rescue, Malcolm Reynolds stepped forward with swagger, and right behind him, Zoe dropped a blunt remark. At the time, all I saw was a kind of cool that felt raw and real. Exactly the attitude you'd expect from people living on the ragged edge of the universe. I had no idea that behind those 4 short words was a quiet act of rebellion by the cast themselves. Yes, Nathan Fillion and his fellow actors helped shape the souls of the crew aboard Serenity, sometimes through changes that existed completely outside the script. But that was only the tip of the iceberg. Did you know that Inara Serra is actually a companion, an elite courtesan protected by law? Or that Zac Efron appeared in the show when he was only 13 years old? And why were the Alliance soldiers wearing uniforms borrowed from another movie? So buckle up. We're about to take a journey through the 15 craziest secrets of Firefly, 2002. 15. Inara Serra, the high-class courtesan role that sparked fierce controversy. I've always remembered Inara Serra as the calmest, most peaceful presence aboard the noisy ship Serenity. The way she carried herself, never flashy, always soft-spoken, dressed modestly, commanded an immediate sense of respect from everyone around her. Back then, I simply thought she was beautiful and mysterious. But as I grew older, I began to realise that Inara represented a quiet revolution that Firefly wanted to introduce. In the early 2000s, television was still filled with social taboos, so creating a companion, a highly educated, high-status courtesan with the legal right to refuse clients, was an incredibly bold move by Joss Whedon. Inara wasn't a victim, she was the one in control, and that very idea terrified Fox. It's painful to learn that the network repeatedly tried to control the character. Executives asked for her profession to be softened, and several scenes showing her autonomy and influence were cut because they feared audiences might find them too sensitive. The result was an Inara who was both the most progressive and the most restrained character in the series. That tension between an artist's vision and a network's caution ultimately made Inara Serra one of the most complex and memorable characters in the show, even though she was never fully allowed to appear exactly as she deserved. 14. Neil Patrick Harris and the parallel universes of casting. When you think of Firefly, whose face comes to mind first? For me, it's the thoughtful eyes of Dr. Simon Tam. Every time I watch the scenes where Simon anxiously cares for his sister River, I feel a strange sense of inevitability, as if that role was created specifically for Sean Maher. But the world we love almost looked very different. In some parallel universe, the man performing illegal surgeries in the cargo bay of Serenity isn't Sean Maher. It's Neil Patrick Harris. Yes, the very same actor who would later become famous as Barney Stinson auditioned for the role and reportedly did very well. But in the end, the producers felt he was simply too funny for Simon's quiet melancholy. And the twists of fate didn't stop there. The alluring role of Inara Serra was originally played by Rebecca Gayheart, who had already filmed the entire pilot episode. But after reviewing the raw footage, the creative team realised the chemistry between her and the rest of the cast just wasn't working. So they made a bold decision: tear it all down and rebuild. They spent the money to reshoot the pilot from scratch just to bring Morena Baccarin into the role. Looking back now, it almost feels like the gods of cinema had their own plan, one that ultimately gave us the perfect version of Serenity we know today. 13. The Big Damn Heroes line and a legendary improvisation. Have you ever wondered what makes a science fiction series become truly legendary? Sometimes it isn't the million-dollar visual effects. Sometimes it's a moment that simply feels human. I still remember the scene when Mal and Zoe appear at the most desperate moment to rescue their friends. Instead of a heroic speech or a formal greeting, Zoe casually delivers the unforgettable line,
"Big damn hero!" closer, think we judge.
It just felt incredibly cool. Exactly the kind of swagger you'd expect from outlaws drifting along the edge of the galaxy. But years later, I discovered something surprising. The most iconic line in the entire series wasn't in the script at all. During the filming of the pilot, the actors were originally supposed to say something much more conventional, safe dialogue that fit the network's expectations. But Nathan Fillion and the cast trusted their instincts. They knew that in that moment, these characters didn't need stiff heroics. They needed a touch of sarcasm, a touch of pride, the attitude of people who had lost battles but refused to surrender. Joss Whedon was smart enough to keep that spontaneous moment. Just 4 words, but they captured the spirit of the Serenity crew better than any long monologue ever could. And for more than 20 years now, that improvised line has slipped into real life. It appears on fan shirts, becomes internet memes, and has even been used as wedding vows by devoted fans. Because sometimes the truth of an unscripted moment carries more weight than any polished line written on paper. 12 Alliance uniforms and the ghost of the past. Have you ever watched a film and suddenly felt a chill the moment a character appears, even before they say a single word? For me, that's exactly what happens whenever the Alliance shows up in Firefly. Their uniforms feel unsettling, rigid, sharp, and strangely cold. At first, I assumed it was simply brilliant costume design. But later, I realised something unexpected. I had seen that same visual fear somewhere else before. It turns out that sense of familiarity wasn't accidental at all. Because Firefly's budget was constantly squeezed by Fox, the production team had to get creative. Their solution was surprisingly practical. They borrowed an entire stockpile of military uniforms from another film, Starship Troopers, 1997. What started as a money-saving decision accidentally became a perfect artistic choice. Starship Troopers was itself a satire about militarism. So when those same uniforms appeared in Firefly, they carried with them a subconscious visual memory of authoritarian systems, worlds where individuals are reduced to numbers beneath rigid discipline. Sometimes limitations force creativity. If the production had more money, they might have designed brand new uniforms. But ironically, it was these recycled costumes that helped create the chilling, oppressive aura surrounding the enemies of Malcolm Reynolds. 11. The Star Wars ship hidden in Firefly. Into the memories of science fiction-obsessed kids back then, the sky wasn't just filled with stars, it was a place where legendary ships lived. I remember spending hours staring into the darker corners of the screen, hoping to catch something unexpected. And Firefly didn't disappoint us with the subtle little gifts hidden throughout its universe. If you have sharp enough eyes, you might notice that in the vast emptiness of the verse, there are sometimes uninvited guests from other franchises drifting across the background. A tiny Millennium Falcon briefly appears in the distance, or familiar Star Wars ships glide quietly across the frame. The visual effects team tucked them in there like a discreet handshake between 2 universes of smugglers. I like to imagine an unofficial meeting between Han Solo and Malcolm Reynolds at some lonely outpost among the stars. Would they argue about who's more charming, or whose rust bucket of a ship actually flies better? These small details are more than simple Easter eggs. They're proof of the filmmaker's love for the broader science fiction tradition, creating a magical connection between distant galaxies in the imagination of the audience. 10. Zac Efron and his 30 brilliant seconds. Some beginnings make us smile when we look back on them decades later. Long before he became the Disney prince who made millions of hearts flutter in High School Musical, or the muscular Hollywood movie star audiences know today, Zac Efron was briefly part of the Serenity crew's universe. I still remember the emotional flashback showing the childhood of the Tam siblings. In that scene, a 13-year-old boy with bright, determined eyes shows his instinct to protect his sister River, even at a young age. That boy was Zac Efron in his first credited acting role. He appears on screen for only about 30 seconds, but the young Simon Tam already revealed a spark of undeniable acting potential. Years later, Zac admitted that when he auditioned, he didn't even know what Firefly was. He simply thought playing a doctor in space sounded far more exciting than appearing in a cereal commercial. It's almost poetic to realise that the actor who later convinced the world that high school was a place for singing and dancing actually began his career in a gritty, morally complex universe like this one. 20 years have passed, and Zac has since played dozens of leading roles, but I suspect those first 30 seconds in the verse remain a shining memory he still cherishes. Serenity, a real home built on the soundstage. There's a reason the conversations aboard Serenity feel so authentic, almost like the way we talk with family members in our own living rooms. That's because Serenity wasn't just a collection of disconnected sets stitched together through clever editing. I remember being amazed when I learned that the production team actually built a continuous ship interior across 2 large sound stages. The cockpit connected directly to the dining area led into the crew quarters, and from there you could walk all the way down to the cargo bay or engine room without a single cut. The actors didn't just arrive to perform, they truly lived inside that ship. The chemistry you see on screen came from months of sharing the same air inside that steel framework. But that beautiful memory was torn apart when the series was cancelled and the set was dismantled. Years later, when hope returned with the feature film, the producers had to rebuild that home from scratch, an extraordinary effort simply to restore the lost soul of Firefly. 8. The bitter fall of a legend told the wrong way. Have you ever felt regret for something full of potential that simply arrived at the wrong time? Firefly is exactly that kind of tragedy. Think back to the early 2000s, when binge-watching didn't exist, and audiences expected to turn on the TV and immediately understand what was happening. Fox treated Joss Whedon's intricate universe like a disposable television show that could be watched in any order. The pilot episode, Serenity, which perfectly explained the Civil War and the ideals of the browncoats, was pushed aside by the network because executives felt it was too slow. Instead, viewers were forced to start with The Train Job, an action-packed episode that assumed audiences already knew who Mal was and why he hated the Alliance. The result was a painful break in trust. Viewers were confused, ratings fell, and the series was cancelled in shockingly short order. Only years later, when the show was released on DVD in its proper order, did many people realise they had missed a masterpiece. It remains a lasting lesson in how short-sighted interference can destroy an entire universe built with care and imagination. 7. The $100,000 model and the love hidden in every dent. In filmmaking, greatness sometimes lies in the details that most people never notice. You see Serenity drifting through the stars, old, battered and scarred, but have you ever wondered what that level of authenticity actually cost? Back then, the ship existed as a physical model worth about $100,000, an enormous amount for a television series that the network itself seemed reluctant to support. The effects team painstakingly crafted every rivet, every burn mark around the engines, and every dent in the ship's steel hull with near-obsessive precision. They weren't just building a prop, they were creating a metal character with a soul. Even though Firefly only lasted 14 episodes, the money and care poured into that ship transformed it into something timeless. Every scratch on Serenity's surface feels like a story about endurance, a small, aging vessel that refuses to surrender to the storms of the galaxy. 6. The memory of Earth that was and the power of silence. In most science fiction stories, creators try to explain the apocalypse in great detail, but in Firefly, humanity's lost home feels more like an old scar. Everyone knows it's there, but but no one wants to touch it and reopen the wound. I've always been fascinated by the way the characters talk about Earth that was. We only know that humanity exhausted the planet's resources and was forced to migrate to a new star system to begin terraforming new worlds. But what exactly happened? A nuclear war? A global plague? Or simply a slow decay from within? Joss Whedon made a brilliant choice by leaving that mystery in the shadows. Those unanswered spaces create a deep sense of longing, one that has kept audiences wondering for more than 20 years. What did humanity lose that was so precious that we now drift among dusty frontier planets instead? 5. The souls of the defeated beneath the stars. Have you ever wondered why Firefly doesn't feel like any other space story? Why it smells more like dust, whiskey, and gunpowder echoing across a frontier plain? That's because the heart of the series doesn't live in the future. It lives in the past, specifically in the shadow of the Battle of Gettysburg during the American Civil War. Inspired in part by the novel The Killer Angels, Joss Whedon positioned his characters on the losing side of history. The brown coats worn by Mal and his fellow soldiers aren't just uniforms, they're symbols of a shattered ideal. These are veterans of a failed rebellion, trying to hold on to a fragment of freedom in a system determined to swallow them whole. When I watch Mal fight, I don't see a hero saving the world. I see a man trying to preserve the last shred of dignity left to someone who lost the war. That historical depth is what transforms Firefly into something more than a space adventure. It becomes a proud, mournful ballad about people who refuse to bow. 4. When Serenity stopped being a set and became a home. There's a warm truth about Firefly that still moves me whenever I think about it. In Hollywood, after the cameras stop rolling, actors usually retreat to their luxurious trailers, enjoying privacy and comfort away from the set. But on the Firefly production, that almost never happened. During breaks between scenes, the cast often chose to stay together in the lounge area of Serenity. They would sit on the worn wooden chairs, talking beneath the dim yellow lights of the ship's interior, just like Mal's crew does at the dinner table. They didn't want to leave, because in that space, they truly felt like they belonged together. Those simple moments of rest helped create a kind of chemistry that no special effect could ever fake. For them, Serenity was never just a piece of scenery. It was a home, a refuge in a world full of pressure and expectations. 3. A hybrid identity and the echo of two last superpowers. Have you ever wondered why, in the vastness of space, our characters occasionally slip into Chinese when they curse or express frustration? I still remember the strange but fascinating feeling of hearing Mal or Inara switch languages so naturally. It wasn't just a stylistic choice to make the show seem cool. In Joss Whedon's vision of the future, the world as we know it collapsed until only two powers remained strong enough to endure: the United States and China. Eventually, they merged into a single political entity known as the Anglo-Sino Alliance. If you look closely at the Alliance flag in the pilot episode, you'll notice a haunting fusion of the stars from the American flag and the symbols from the Chinese flag. It paints a world where cultures have been reshaped and languages blended together, creating a reality that feels both foreign and eerily familiar. This small detail gives Firefly a remarkable level of social depth, reminding us that even in the distant future, the echoes of humanity's past still linger in the way people speak and live. 2. Fred, the silent companion across every planet. Amid the political conflicts and philosophical themes of Firefly, the show still contains quiet, charming details that feel almost comforting. Do you remember the scenes where Mal rides a horse across the dusty plains of frontier planets? Those moments always reminded me of the old westerns I used to watch with my grandmother, where the horse wasn't just transportation, but a loyal companion. There's a small behind-the-scenes secret that only the most dedicated fans tend to notice. No matter which planet Mal visits or how the setting changes, the horse he rides is always the same one. His name is Fred. Keeping the same horse throughout multiple episodes wasn't just a practical decision. It also created a subtle sense of continuity for the audience. In many ways, Fred becomes a quiet constant in the ever-changing universe of Firefly. Whenever I see Mal climb into the saddle, I feel a strange reassurance, as if, no matter where you travel in this galaxy, some of the most fundamental bonds between humans and nature still remain. 7 planned seasons, and the rebellion of loyal hearts. This is perhaps the most painful part of the story for anyone who loves Firefly. Joss Whedon originally envisioned a long journey for the crew of Serenity, one that could span 7 full seasons. He wanted audiences to watch these characters grow older, to slowly uncover the secrets surrounding River Tam, and to see the conflict with the Alliance reach its ultimate conclusion. But that journey was cut short by executives at Fox who believed the show was too dark for mainstream television. They pushed for changes, lighter stories, simpler plots, but the creative team refused to compromise the soul of the series. Like true browncoats, they chose integrity over conformity. The result was brutal. The show was cancelled after only 11 episodes had aired. I still remember hearing about the Save Firefly campaign when thousands of fans mailed postcards to Fox in a desperate attempt to keep the show alive. The effort ultimately failed, but it proved something important. Firefly never truly died. It continued to live in the determination of the people who made it, and in the lasting love of its audience. 14 episodes may be a short life for a television series, but it was more than enough to create an enduring legend. 14 episodes, 1 feature film, and 20 years of nostalgia that has never faded. Looking back, I've come to realise that the greatness of Firefly was never measured in ratings or awards. It lives in its unfinished nature. Perhaps because it ended too soon, our memories of Serenity remain frozen at their brightest moment. A moment defined by freedom, loyalty, and people brave enough to say no to authority. And you, if you could bring back one series and finish the story it never got to tell, what would it be? Firefly or another lost legend? Leave a comment below so we can relive those memories together. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next journey through cinematic nostalgia. And for now, keep flying